Hello, and welcome to this eSchool Media webcast. My name's Andrew Barber, and I'm a senior contributing editor here at eSchool Media. And I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by It's Learning. Now, over the next hour or so, we'll be looking at the 9 characteristics of efficient districts and how streamlined instructional workflows can help give teachers more time with their students, improve student engagement, and increase student ownership of their own learning. Now, before I introduce our speakers for today, let me just take a few moments to highlight a couple of items about the console that we're going to be using today. First, we are going to be recording the event, so you do not have to take notes if you don't want to. We'll be sending out an email to everyone on the call today. We'll be sending out an email that will contain a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation from that same email. And second, please ask questions at any point. Don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. If you have a question at any point, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. And I hope we'll have about 15 minutes or so at the end when our speakers can answer your questions. We also have a group chat function, which you can find via that blue group chat icon down at the bottom of your screen. And please use chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool Media team if you have any technical problems or anything else, quite frankly. But do me a favor, please don't use the chat to ask questions of the presenters. They are simply not going to have time to monitor the chats while they give their presentation. So again, if you have a question for the presenters, please use the Q&A panel instead. With that out of the way, let me formally introduce our speakers for today. Michael Gorman is president of 21st Century Educational Technology and Learning, which is a consulting firm. As an educator, though, he oversaw the Integrated Solutions Block, a program that integrates technology with core standards for more than 1,000 students at Woodside Middle School near Fort Wayne in Indiana. And he also started up the district's one-to-one program and has become really familiar with LMS systems along the way. And in fact, he told me before the webinar that the unique capabilities of the It's Learning LMS is really what caught his eye. Our other speaker today is Joey Gardner, who is Director of Instructional Technology at Spartanburg County School, District 6 in South Carolina. Joey has 13 years experience in education, 8 of which he spent in the classroom in the Spartanburg and Charleston County schools. And in his current position, he works with students, teachers, and administrators in all 15 district schools, implementing a 21st century technology and teaching tech skills. And he is dedicated to integrating technology into all content areas of his district with a particular focus on college and career readiness. And then toward the end of the presentation, we'll also hear briefly from George Scotti, who is Director of Marketing at It's Learning. So welcome to all of you. It's a real pleasure to have you here today. Mike, why don't you get us started?
Thank you so much. It is just wonderful to be here today. First of all, to have so many educators joining us and so many people just wondering and doing some of the same type of thing of exploring this area of how do we get teachers the opportunity to really do what they do best, and that is teach. And we'll talk about some of those things today, but I want to start off with a little bit of an introduction here as far as some ideas of past practice, where we've come from, where we've gone. Like I said, I started up a one-to-one program about 8 years ago, and it has been, now that we're all K-12, we are working with all the kids. We even do some of the things where we actually get some of our, we make up snow days online. So let's talk about how we got there and where we're going and some of the things we need to look for as we go through. When I first started teaching, and this will be about 40 years for me in education, we had the book. And a lot of you online probably remember those days where we got our standards from the book, we got our content from the book, all the processes. There were questions and things like that at the end of the chapter. They were all from the book. The lessons and activities, a lot of that stuff came from the book. Even the inquiry was the book in scope and sequence and checkups, and the book also gave us even assessment pieces. Well, that's how a lot of us started teaching using that book. But, we had a lot of great things we would look for in that book. And if some of you remember some of the book adoptions we would have, we were all wondering, what were the peripherals? What are some other things that you're going to give us from the book? And so what happened along the way, we would look for some of these things. We would look for, is there going to be maps? Is there going to be stuff for our overhead projectors? Some of you remember the days of the film strip. Are there going to be film strips with it? Is there something we can use our opaque projectors with? And a lot of times, the book companies furnished us with a lot of those different types of ideas. Well, as we went along, good teachers, and this is the thing I want to let people know, is we have had great teachers all the way through at least the time I remember being in education and when I was in school, and they went beyond the book. I remember going out and going to garage sales so that I could get encyclopedias in my classroom, because it was the thought of, gee, how can I get all the knowledge of the world into my classroom? And so we would go through and we would get different encyclopedias trying to get all the letters. And, of course, I'd go down to the public library and I would find 16-millimeter films to show the kids. Some of you probably remember films like Donald Duck in Mathematics Land. And, of course, we had things like the Children's Digest and Weekly Reader, or we took our kids on field trips, okay? And so good teaching has always gone beyond that book and looked for those peripherals. Well, today we have an interesting question, and that is, so many districts are starting to say, books are great, but books are not the only thing. And so as we start getting into this digital age, how do we actually go beyond the book? And as we start looking beyond the book, we can start thinking, gee, remember back in the days of the slate and now we've got the computer? What is it that this computer can actually offer us? And so now we get into other language. There's open educational resource content, which is amazing out there. And there is just so much of it. In fact, that's one of the problems. There's so much of it, and we'll talk about that. There's high-quality subscription services. There's all types of Internet videos and blogs, and we can put our kids into interactive tools and different search engines and databases and research sites. We can suddenly, we're not suddenly just with one magazine. We can get every magazine there is, every newspaper there is, lesson guides, graphics, pictures, forums, maps, atlases. We have discussion boards that our kids could be a part of, and virtual storage drives. As I start saying all these types of things, and we even think about other classrooms and simulations, we start getting a little bit of information overload. Instead, wow, there's all these great things, but how do I access it, and where do I even go to start accessing it? Ends up being one of the things we wonder. So how do we keep up with it all? Because after all, we also have the curriculum. We have the standards. We have the content. We have assessments we have to think about. There's collaboration we need to be doing. And, of course, there's the soft skills, the 4 C's that we want to make sure that our kids are really getting something from. And so as we go into this, how do teachers deal with all this? Teachers have a lot on their plate. I go in hundreds and hundreds of schools across the country working with teachers in areas like project-based learning, STEM education, technology integration. And an interesting study that came out shows that 59% of teachers say they have too many systems to interact with, okay? They're spending 5 hours a week just on searching for good things on the web. Okay, and I really do believe we do need to be searching for things on this web. But how about if we could make this just a little bit easier on our teachers? So again, the stuff is there for them, and they can do what they do best, and that's teach. Okay, 51% of schools actually said teachers are spending 5 to 9 hours a week just on curriculum and grading versus teaching. So I've got a question here before we go on, and I would love everybody to take a chance to go ahead and click on whatever you are using, and we'll see what everybody's doing here. But how many different digital logins are your students and teachers using on a daily basis? Think about that for a second. Are you logging into an LMS? Then are you logging in to get to a streaming service? Then are you logging in to get to some type of database? And how about the grade book and all these types of things? So I've got this up on the screen. I'm going to wait about 30 seconds, but I want you thinking in your head, how many of these things are we doing? So we're having to remember passwords, we're having to remember the different logins, and we're hoping we get there, because we're going to talk about solutions about that and how we can get around that. So as I have up on the screen, notice your choices are 1 to 5, 6 to 10, and 11. And so I would love to see, I think it would be interesting to see just kind of where do we fall in as a group here. So I'm going to go and keep on voting, but I'm going to go to our results, and we can see that about 57% of our people are somewhere between 1 and 5. We have another third that are 6 to 10, and take a look at those 11 pluses. We got close to 10% on that. We all know as teachers, and I spent 33 years in the classroom, the more time we spend having to do things that could be automated, it takes away time from what we do best, and that's what works with kids. So how are teachers dealing with this? Well, 45% of teachers have to manage at least 5 logins, which I think we came pretty close to that. 11% have to manage 16 or more. So we were I think it's kind of interesting how our poll was really close to what that said. So close to 50% of administration staff time is spent on updating, rostering, distributing, putting out all these curriculum pieces. And what happens here? Let's take one more poll, because I'd love to see how well we line up with some of the statistics. Is teacher turnover a problem in your district? And when I define teacher turnover, how many people do we have there that are teaching? Number one, it's too much for them and they get out, or possibly the thought is there, they just can't get out right then, or we're losing some of our young talent because they just can't keep up with it all. So just a little thought here is teacher turnover a problem in your district? And think of turnover as that idea of people actually leaving, or people just feeling stressed and wanting to leave, not knowing what to do, what comes next, those types of things. So as you are doing that, you could either go minimal, or you could actually have some turnover, or it's a major problem in your district. And this is different between all districts. So let's take a look at our results. Kind of interesting. We actually have, which isn't this something, 28%. It is minimal, but take a look at that. We're knocking on almost 50% having some turnover, and 28%, it's a major problem. So again, I think it's interesting how we're lining up with what some of the data is actually talking about. Well, what does this mean to educators? Okay, we talked about that higher turnover rate. And actually some data has shown us that 50% are leaving within the first 5 years, which I think is important because we're losing some amazing people. It isn't what they thought it was because of all the mechanisms in front of them. So as we go along, we can take a look that one of the things that has to happen is we have to make time for great teaching. Okay, we need to improve our teacher effectiveness, and this outweighs any other school education program or policy. Okay, students with great teachers can achieve in half a year what a student with poor teachers can do. And I think it's very important that we watch our adjectives on this, because a poor teacher does not mean that they don't know how to teach. What it could mean is that they're just overwhelmed with what they need to do. And so we have to think about that as we define some of these terms. And so how do we make these differences? How does professional development even look in the district? Well, as we go on here, what is the way out? Because what we're seeing right now is a lot of expectations, a lot of great teachers putting in lots of time. I was just talking to a beginning teacher who told me that they are staying up every night till 11 o'clock at night just trying to make sure they're doing the right thing and getting the kids what they need. So how do we make this happen? Well, first of all, we have to start shifting that idea of the book, that whole idea of the book paradigm through technology, okay? Districts need to align curriculum across the district. That is so important. And you know something? We have been doing that. A lot of districts have been doing it. My question is, how many people are finding some type of automated way to do this? How are they using their digital technology to make that happen? So we have to look at technology in some multifaceted ways, okay? We have to eliminate some of the silos between our curriculum and our technology departments. And we all know that in our school districts that we're at, how sometimes the technology department isn't in line with the curriculum department, and they need to be. And we need to really give teachers some relevant, needed PD, and there are infrastructures to make that happen. So what are some 9 characteristics of efficient districts as we start looking at this? One-to-one is not always the total answer. It's how we make it all happen and how we bring in that digital platform, okay? I just mentioned one thing, one login. It's awesome when teachers can just go to one place, they log on, kids just go to one place, they log on, and there's no other passwords needed. I've sat in third grade classrooms with kids struggling with multiple passwords, and that gets in the way of good learning, okay? An ability to integrate different systems and platforms. You know, when we take our assessment in our LMS, is it talking to our our student management system, and so that we're not having to re-enter grades that we get from one area and now have to type them into another area. And a lot of you know what I'm talking about as far as that. Even bringing in things like universal design and personal learning and one-to-one and technology, and all of these types of things we have to look at. And we have to lower the costs at the same time. Teachers who are able to spend more time on instruction find success, okay? And that instruction could be whatever you want to call it, whether it be direct, whether it be facilitating students, helping with their learning, all that type of stuff. That will help us with less turnover, and we actually get a chance to look at actionable data. And so that's what districts are doing to be successful. How does technology support all this? Well, streamlining the curriculum, automating the workflow, minimizing those logins, providing standards-aligned instruction, okay, focusing on the learning objectives of children, giving customized, concrete, and actionable feedback, okay? And as you look at these, giving students ownership and supporting student voice and choice, what I want to ask you is your technology doing these types of things in the school right now? In other words, when a teacher creates a lesson, can they go right to the standards, and the standards are actually pointing at some of the content that they need, and they don't have to go out and spend 5 hours trying to find that good content? There's already vetted content for them. And is that all part of your district mapping of curriculum? And is this all automated so that all of these vehicles are talking with each other? To me, that's really important as we start talking about the technology to support learning. So as we talk about all of this fitting together, we can take a look at curriculum. And as we look at curriculum, we have to start saying, okay, with this idea of curriculum, how does assessment and accountability fit in? And how does the technology fit in? And as we look at these 3 items coming together, we see the sweet spot. And to me, that's what a good infrastructure starts doing, is it really hits that sweet spot of curriculum and instruction, technology, and assessment and accountability. So as we start looking at this, we need to have a goal of shifting from one system that makes teachers and children and curriculum more efficient to one that makes the whole system more effective, okay? So that's as we look at shifting from this idea of the book to bringing this all together. And the amazing thing we have today is we have the technology that can make this finally happen. I got one last poll question, and that is, how do you administer valuable and ongoing professional development for your teachers? Take a look at that. Think a minute as you actually look at it, because do you have centralized PD? All teachers can access and use. Do you have some of your PD online? I actually talk about that. How do we actually flip our PD and bring these on so that teachers can get things as they need? We don't really have an organized system of PD, and none of our PD is done or available online. So think about that, and there's no right or wrongs here. It's just where we are as we're going through this walk of bringing technology in and helping teachers teach students using the technology. So let's see what our audience has said here. And as we can see, we're pretty even up. And I think it's great that we have some people that have really centralized it. And we have some where it's online. We have others where, 23%, they don't really have an organized system of PD, and none of our PD is available online. And so, like I said, there's no right or wrong here. It's where we are in the journey and how we're using technology to really make this journey happen. So as I start closing up here, we know PD can reinforce and foster efficiency, okay? And so how do we now use our technology to even help with the PD? Remember I told you earlier that how are we mapping our curriculums with the technology, and how are we really bringing cool sources, great OER sources to our teachers? Well, at the same time, how can we blend this idea of PD so that it's not all just stand and deliver, but there are workshops, there are abilities to use things online. There are even ways that we have virtually opened up our PD beyond the school walls. Even bringing in our personal learning communities, and how are we tying in our actual technology to help foster those types of ideas. So as we start looking at these types of things, really start seeing, when you look at whether it be a learning management system or any other technology in your school, how can I leverage the LMS, the learning management system, to talk about all of these different type ideas, including this idea of even the PD. I bring up PD because our next guest, Joey Gardner, is going to talk a little bit about how they've done some of this functioning and how they've used the technology and the LMS to what I'd like to call amplify the ability to get things done. So I'm going to hand it over to Joey.
Thank you, Michael. As has been stated, my name is Joey Gardner, and I'm the Director of Instructional Technology in Spartanburg School District 6. I want to first thank everyone for allowing me to tell you our story and some of the fantastic things that we're doing here in District 6. But I do want to state that we're just one district. This is our story, this is our answer, and our solution to the problems. And as I go through our solution and our practice in District 6, I'm going to mirror a lot of what Mr. Gorman has mentioned, and I'm going to just give you some examples as to how we're dealing with it in District 6. I do think it's very important, before I get started, that you kind of have a snapshot of our district. We're in the upstate portion of South Carolina. We're a moderately large school district when you look at our student population based on our land mass. We are actually a small microcosm of our county. There are 7 districts within Spartanburg County, but even more so a small microcosm of our state in South Carolina. When a lot of people in the area kind of look at us, they don't realize this natural progression of our demographics and everything that we're faced with. One thing that's hugely important in our district is our 9 elementary schools really foster this multifaceted community aspect where each one is very distinct, and we centralize into one high school, Dorman High School, at the culmination of the education. That's important because that's where our motto in District 6 really came to be, and we say District 6 is a district where all children are first. That's really helped us in determining our mission to ensure that all of our District 6 students get the highest quality that they're able to have. Now that we've gotten into this 21st century learning style that Michael has mentioned many times, we learned that we had a mission, we had a motto, we had all of those things, but we needed to kind of look at our focus. And he talked about those soft skills. That's one of the biggest things that drives our professional development in District 6, focusing on those 21st century learners and talking about those, what we call the 4 C's here: college, career, citizenship, and character readiness. To accomplish that focus, we knew that we needed to start with our teachers. They're the backbone of any good district. We needed to listen to them, take a poll, kind of gauge where they were. And like I said, this is not I'm going to say this many times, this is not an overnight process. We started many years ago looking at this. But we gathered that beneficial information from our teachers using multiple ways. But the best way we found were those just anonymous surveys where teachers were open and able to say whatever they wanted to say to reach this common goal that we've coined as our motto, a district where children are always first. We started administering these surveys years ago, and it helped us figure out what we needed to do. And Michael mentioned the infrastructure and that he used the term, that sweet spot of curriculum. That's really where we wanted to start. We knew as a district ourselves the one-to-one ratio of students having accessibility for a device and that aspect wasn't really where we could start because of budget constraints and just things that we're faced with in education. We knew a one-to-one initiative wasn't our starting gate. So what we did was we backed up to the infrastructure and some of the guidelines that we needed to set in place in order to start this process that we knew was best for our children. So we started with, making sure that teachers, when they were given what they had asked for, up-to-date technology and use of that and training of that in their classroom, we wanted to make sure first and foremost it was going to work. So we had to start working with them and building that kind of community within the classroom that it was going to work and that it was okay if you wanted to. If you were trying something and you didn't really succeed as well as you wanted, that it's okay to fall back and just reflect. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later on in the presentation. But one of the other things that we did, we thought it was beneficial to supplement those devices by enacting a board policy of bring your own device, allowing children the autonomy to bring their own device, what they're comfortable with, working with that. But with that comes problems as well, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But we knew that we had to get a device that was going to foster our college, career, citizenship, and readiness. So what we did is we went with the Dell Latitude touchscreen. We thought to enable those soft skills, it was best for them to have a platform that they could work on, and that laptop just seemed to be what worked best for us that we put into our school. The next step was professional development. We knew that that was going to be the focus where we really needed to pay most of our attention with our teachers, because teachers today, not all of them are as tech savvy. There's so many different levels as technology comes into the classroom, and we needed to foster that sense of community for the classroom and the teacher and just the ownership of it within there. So we pushed out these devices. We allowed teachers the professional development to learn how to use them. But with that came all of these other programs and all of these other supplemental aids that they could use using technology. But with that came a problem in itself, because teachers were scared about, how can I do this? How can I start using this in my classroom? And what we saw is we started to notice that the efficiency in the classroom started dwindling. We would do evaluations. We would go in as administrators and notice that the classroom teacher wasn't, always using their time the most efficient. And it wasn't because they weren't a good teacher. They were actually trying to push these 4 C's in, trying to use these strategies that we were teaching them in professional development. But in turn, a lot of the time was then going to non-instructional time of how do we all get logged in and just things like that. People see this across districts, across the nation, I'm sure. So we had to quickly change our approach to fix that problem. We focused our efforts on these 5 points that you see here. We knew that we needed to start with meaningful professional development. We had professional development, but that professional development of the past it started becoming cumbersome, and we wanted to make it more meaningful for our teachers, and we needed to become innovative in that process of bringing forth professional development. So what we did was we started really modeling that from the top down, starting with administration. How were we giving information to our principals? How were principals giving information to teachers? And then in turn, how are teachers giving it to students? So that's where we focused that modeling concept. And later on when we get to talking about adult learning, you'll see why that's so important and that modeling term comes into play. We really needed just a fresh delivery and needed to move away from that traditional sit and get type of instruction. So what we did in order to best assist our teachers in maximizing their efficiency is that we went in and we started giving them these evaluations. We were giving written and verbal evaluations on what we were seeing with the use of technology and all the other aspects of the classroom. One of the key components in our district is we did not make it mandatory. We didn't say that you have to do this in your classroom. We just, like I said, fostered from the top down what our expectations were, what we were doing as administration, and it just kind of trickled down. And like I said, this was not an overnight process. This started a few years, probably about 6-7 years ago, and now we're kind of getting to the end process of where we're starting to just refocus some things and things like that. We also knew that above all, we needed to give teachers the appropriate resources to do their job. That community that I talked about, if they don't have the resources to foster the community with technology, it becomes kind of cumbersome for them. But as all school districts know, we then had another problem. How do we do this? How do we increase our teachers' efficiency? Because we all know that there are budget constraints. We needed to figure out how we could maximize our funding and get the results that we needed. And we did that through a couple of different processes. The biggest process that helped us in bringing this together, we knew all of the problems that we were facing. We knew the solutions, but we needed help in order doing that. So our partnership with It's Learning and what we've coined as our one-stop shop really was kind of the catalyst to all of this coming together, because now we had a place where we could do really everything that we wanted to do within the actual management system. We knew we wanted to go to a management system, but there were certain, I guess, non-negotiables that we had as a district. The biggest non-negotiable was we knew that we needed that mechanism, that driving force for our professional development with our teachers. We wanted it to be able to do professional development that meant more to them. We were holding professional development after school or during the summer or on teacher work days, but teachers by that time were either tired, it's the summertime, they wanted their break. So we wanted to put it kind of in their own hands. When can you take professional development? And It's Learning helped us get to that. We were able to start moving professional development onto our It's Learning platform. And this type of platform has been phenomenal in the kind of the progression of the way it's happened and the transformation that's happened in our district, because we are now in our third year of using It's Learning, and this year is the first year. As my position aides, I get a lot of questions about the learning management system, and this is the first year that the questions have turned more to can it do rather than how does it do, how does the platform do. And that's huge when it comes to education. I was a classroom teacher for 8 years. I taught science, project-based learning, and all of that STEM initiatives in our district. And it's all coming together with the questions of how can I now do this, and how can I get professional development that's going to help me in my classroom best teach my children. So for our district, we came up with a driving force of professional development that we're calling D6 University. D6 obviously stands for District 6. But I want to tell you a little bit about this before I really talk about the It's Learning portion of it. But District 6 University is a time, and I'm going to use an example of last Thursday, when all of our district 5th grade teachers, I'm using that as an example because it just happened, came together from all schools across all diversity, across all walks of life, came into a centralized area, and they attended an entire day session of professional development that was meaningful to them. They left knowing that there were things out there for them to use in the future with their students. They developed things for them to use with their students. But before we started this journey with It's Learning, this was not possible in our district. We could bring them together, but we would have to bring them together all the time. Emails became cumbersome. There were other ways we did things in the past of trying to communicate teacher to teacher. But now with It's Learning, their teachers are in the position of being students. Every teacher you see in these pictures, they're in a District 6, 5th grade university course where they're the students. There's a facilitator of the course that's a director at the district level, but they are the students. They are in there working. They are building classes and collaborating and working together for the betterment of their students. And like I said, this was never possible in the past. So this face-to-face that you see here is still crucial. That by no means is going away. But it has allowed us now to take that face-to-face and maximize on our face-to-face time, because they're able to work outside of the classroom on things to better their students. One thing that we have instilled, and this is our district's kind of model, and I'm pretty sure everyone's heard of the SAMR model of enhancing technology integration. This model and embedding this model within all our professional development and all of our training with our teachers has been crucial. To see the evolution of our professional development over the past few years, this technology and integration enhancement model that you're seeing here has actually been another evolution that we've seen. Before, in past, technology in the classroom, if kids were doing research or, just on a computer even, the administration may take that as a sign of, oh, they're using technology. But this actual realization of the use of student technology and how is the student actually using technology and embedding it into our professional development, we have seen significant changes on the use of the technology in the classroom. And just as we've said many times, the modeling of how teachers are doing it. So we're modeling it in their professional development, and then they're going back and they're using it in their classroom. Like I've always said, if you can be a student in a class, you always know it's a lot easier to be the teacher of a class. One other thing that I wanted to share with you before I wrap mine up, I've always heard that a picture, as you just saw, is worth 1,000 words, and then if you had a video, it was multiplied multiple times. So what I've done is we've coined a video for our professional development kind of model, and I just want to it's only about 2 minutes long. I want to take those 2 minutes and let you see just a little brief snippet of what our district is doing with professional development.
We took the information that you shared on your surveys and selected the top 5 topics.
Because one of the things I heard from you guys is we want our 4- and 5-year-olds to be independent with inquiry. Right. And that if we're having to sit beside them and write it, then who's doing the learning? We are. And so if we want to foster innate curiosity, we got to have them be able to touch and do. We want them to be able to hold their thinking so we can monitor and gauge their learning.
The responses to a Google form are always populated here.
I love D6 University because it gives teachers an opportunity to come together and learn about best practices.
Did you notice that some of those words might be words that would be unfamiliar to your students, and you would want to spend some time with those words, and then not only during your read aloud, but bringing those words back to your students.
I love D6 University because it was a chance for me to get to talk with my peers about real issues, and it was very interesting to see that we all have the same needs no matter what school we are, no matter what socioeconomic group.
Words like travel, I mean, we could talk about how they come to school, they travel in a car, they travel by bus, and then
that would even be a good greeting at the door in the morning. How did you travel to school this morning? Yeah.
Great chance for teachers all across the district to get together and collaborate, share ideas. I've learned a lot about technology so far, just how to incorporate activities into the classroom with the 4K students. It's not just about the high school students in the upper levels.
We need opportunities to hold their thinking and to be able to go deeper with depth of knowledge.
The good thing about ClassFlow is that it allows you as the student to interact with the flip chart itself.
Building vocabulary, start from the ground up, with pictures, one word, descriptive words, and then adding sentences, just building on that.
Every single student in the school district has something that they are gifted in.
It's teachers the opportunity to be leaders amongst one another, and so it's teachers learning from teachers.
Our children are first, and we're putting them first and learning ways to improve.
If there's one thing that I would have to make time for each year, it would have to be this.
Okay, I hope that really showed you, as far as our professional development, how this is all tying back to that efficiency within the classroom and helping us help our teachers in order to maximize that efficiency. We're always continually looking ahead. We're monitoring, getting teacher feedback, making the process better for our district. We're still allowing teachers that flexibility of using our stuff and using the learning management system, but that number is steadily rising over the last few years. I think, like I said, we can attribute that to the fact that these template courses that we're building inside of It's Learning within our management system that we're coined and building at our District 6 universities with teachers, with relevancy, and the fact that they can go back and then use it in their classroom has been a tremendous asset to this actual increased usage in our classrooms. As I said before, we are one district. This is what's worked for us. I know that every district's going to be different. We are so proud that we have partnered with It's Learning and embarked on this journey. I ultimately know that's what's best for our children. I think that's what our district's superintendent and our school board really thinks, and I want to say thank you again for allowing me to tell you our story. I'm now going to turn this over to George Gotti, the Director of Marketing from It's Learning.
Thank you, Joey and Michael, for both of your presentations and your stories. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how It's Learning aligns to what both Michael and Joey have talked about today. It's Learning has helped large districts and small districts use our teaching and learning platform to streamline curriculum, content, assessment, and professional development across the district to allow teachers to spend more time teaching and with students versus curating and creating content. One example of this is Houston ISD in Texas. They have over 1 million learning objects in the It's Learning library, and all mapped out to standards and scope and sequence. So you can see that something like this kind of a tool would help teachers be more efficient and do what they do best, which is teaching and spending more time with students. We would love to talk about this with anyone who is interested. If you go to itslearning.com, you can find more information. And in addition to that, you can request to talk to one of our representatives who would be more than happy to tell you a little bit more about what we might be able to do for you. So with that, I want to thank everybody and turn it back over to Andrew for the Q&A.
All right, well, thank you so much, George, and thank you, Michael and Joey, for a really fascinating presentation of where you're moving with teaching and learning in Spartanburg and what Michael was doing in his integrated solutions block and also in the one-to-one programs. We still have about 17 minutes left, so we'll take this time up looking at some questions that have come in. If you still have questions, it's not too late. Just type it into that Q&A panel and hit the submit button, and we'll try and get to it. If we don't get to your question in the remaining time, don't worry. Someone from It's Learning will follow up with you to get you an answer. So why don't we head straight back into one of the questions, and Joey, I want to turn to you for this one, at least to kick off, and then maybe Michael, you can add to it. Talking about 21st century skills, Joey, you mentioned that in your school district you talk about the 4 C's being college, career, citizenship, and character. And now, I know that's probably a play off the other 4 C's that have been out there and been talked about in terms of 21st century skills: collaboration, communication, creativity. Can you talk a bit about how these 21st century skills and how you are seeing these skills and the 4 C's that you've developed, and how that compares to maybe the more widely used concept of the 4 C's?
Well, in Spartanburg 6, those 4 C's, yes, they are definitely a play off of the original. They're embedded in every aspect of our curriculum. They're embedded in every aspect of our school, just environment. When you walk into a school environment, you just see that overlooming 4 C's kind of come into play as you're walking through. As much as I can give you a simple example of walking through an elementary school with all of the colleges that a teacher attended, all of their degrees, students can talk about that kind of thing. And I think that with these 21st century skills and using our technology focus and where we are, that's building this collaboration, as you just mentioned, between the students. They're allowing them to talk behind the scenes as far as about what their questions are, and kind of the teacher becoming more of a facilitator than that traditional teacher role of standing in front of the classroom and just giving information to be regurgitated back on a test. That we're seeing that kind of model just kind of go away when this other kind of model is coming into play.
Okay, great. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm a big however you want to call the soft skills. To me, I don't think we've been doing enough of that across the country. I think it's really interesting because as you look at your standards, and a lot of times teachers will say, well, how do I have time for the 4 C's now? Well, as you look at your standards, take a look at the verbs in your standards. The verbs are the soft skills. They are the 4 C's. But you see, what's been happening in our country is we've been pushing content, the nouns, because that's what's on the standardized testing. We got to slow down a little bit and take a look at those verbs and find out what processes we can make happen. And then also, how can technology serve that, okay? We look at collaboration. It's Learning has a great discussion format, and so then how do we leverage the technology? And then my last thing that I always tell schools, not only are you facilitating the 4 C's, however you want to call it, soft skills, how are you assessing them? And that's another thing, that's another conversation.
Okay. All right, terrific. Well, I'm going to stick with you, Mike, to the next question. You talked in your presentation about how you have, visited and talked to hundreds of schools. And I'm sure it's no surprise to you that whether it's in K-12 education or in higher education, resistance to change is an issue in education, whether it's within the curriculum or within the technology department. How do you, as you talk to these schools, how do you overcome that resistance, and what sort of strategies can schools look at?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is we have to. And I do this with every teacher I work with, every school district I work with. How do we, first of all, let's honor what we've been doing right, okay? There are teachers out there that have been doing amazing things for 20, 30, 40 years, and more. It's just 40 years is longest on my scope. But how do we honor what they're doing, and then how do we give them small steps to bring in some of these types of ideas? Because you know something, the 4 C's, the soft skills, they really have been on the radar for hundreds of years. Okay, how do we actually honor what people are doing and then take them the next step to say, look, we can do this? Or do you see how this little factor just here in It's Learning can help you be more productive, and now you've actually got the time? Because it really comes down to, in the end, it really isn't that they're against the change. It's how do I find the time to make this change? And I think technology productivity can help us in that, and that's where you see some of those answers in an LMS like It's Learning.
Okay, great. Joey, do you have anything to add?
Yes,
sure,
I was going to say, I'd like to add to that. One thing in our district, you talk about resistance, and I know far too well resistance is there and it's still alive. But I mentioned when I was talking about our story, we have fostered that sense of letting teachers do it at their own pace. And I know from my standpoint, and being in administration for just 4 years now, going back to when I was teaching, that's kind of the way I always wanted to get things changed as even a teacher, kind of going about it subconsciously a different route. So that's why I haven't forced any mandatory usage of technology, because what I've seen happening over the last 3 years, even with its learning, the teachers that were resisting at first are now, because of student-driven just want to, are now jumping in and having to use it because their students are used to that at this point, and they know that resistance has to be changed.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to turn to another question, and Joey, I'll stick with you for this one. Personalized learning, and it's something that a lot of people are driving towards and want to achieve, and have hit some roadblocks along the way. Have you got someone from the audience want to know some ways that they can facilitate personalized learning in the classroom? Can you help them on that?
Well, I will be the first to say that personalized learning in the classroom is a lot at the forefront, a lot harder than what we're used to as educators, teachers. Mm-hmm. That's mostly where the resistance comes from, in my opinion. So really, within our professional development, we have sessions that are based on personalized learning. How do we accommodate that child that needs a little remediation, or sitting in the seat directly beside him, the child that needs that enrichment because they're done with the standards that we're going through. So building those that's where Let's Learning was a huge benefit for us, because we knew those kids. We had those kids, the outliers that we needed to talk to or needed to reach, and we knew that personalized learning was the route to do that. So what we've done is we've started helping teachers build those personalized learning platforms for those two major categories. You've got your basic students and then the other two. And then when they see that and they see the benefit of that personalized learning for that student and growing that one individual student, they're seeing that, okay, I can keep that in my toolbox over here and just pull it out the next time I have a student that needs this, or tweak it for this other student that may need just a little bit different. So, just teaching the tools in order to do that, that's what we've done in our district to accommodate that.
Okay, terrific. Mike, do you want to have anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add, as you look at that type of realm of idea, I think it's really important that the district define and also determine the difference between personalized learning and individualized learning. And because we're really talking possibly two different things and two different pedagogies. Mm-hmm. But whether you go personalized or individualized, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is technology is making things possible today that were never possible before. And so whichever way you go, look to see what your technology can do for you, because we can now do things that only Dewey dreamed about.
Okay. Well, I was sticking with the same sort of theme about individualized instruction, personalized instruction, and also resistance to change. I mean, this whole move, to use the glib phrase of the day, the move from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side, that does involve a big change on the behalf of the teaching on the faculty, and there is this sense sometimes of a fear of a loss of control. Joey, have you confronted this, and how do you help teachers besides, you talked about some of the professional development ideas, how do you overcome that particular sense of sort of loss of control as you move to this guide on the side concept?
Well, honestly, being a high school science teacher by trade and by my background, that's been one of the most passionate parts of my job is teaching like I said, high school teachers especially, the ability to lose that control of the classroom. So what we have done to combat that in our district is focusing, like I said, we've always been a top-down kind of district, not mandating, but just modeling and training. So we've trained our administration to start facilitating that more side view of the instruction. And when we're doing any professional development, you could walk into our professional development and not know who is actually leading the professional development. And, just student involvement and student feedback, we do a lot, like I said, with surveys. And we've asked students, what was the one thing that you do differently in your classes, yada, yada. And that's one of the reoccurring things that students say. I wish I could have been able to just go in, know what I know, and then be able to do it based on projects, things like that, and show the relevance. Because, students are going to learn at their own pace anyway. And at the high school level, that exact situation is fostered and helped certain students become better students in the long run than they would have had they been standing, or the teacher been standing at the front of the classroom just giving information for them to recall on a test.
All right, well, great, thank you. And, I just wanted to come back to, you mentioned just in the most recent answer, the teacher training and the professional development. Now, this D6 university that you have set up in Spartanburg District 6 looks extremely effective, and for schools and districts that want to move towards something similar, how do they get started? You've gone quite far down the road, it seems. What are the first steps you take towards moving towards a really meaningful PD program?
Well, I failed to mention this, and I'm glad you asked that question, because D6 University was really birthed in our district probably 2 years ago, and it was all based on principals, our principal feedback. Principals came together. We had kind of what we called a innovation day of just thinking outside of the box. What can we do? We know, like I said in my presentation, we know what we need to do. How can we do it with the constraints that exist in our district currently? And our principals actually came up with this idea. They said they said it best when they said our teachers are the masters of their trade. They're the ones that know what they need to learn. They are the ones that know what they need to do. So if we could bring them all together and give them this environment just of collaboration and working and to develop that grade level, because you have so many different schools with so many different diversities. Every school can benefit from someone else. So, like I said, the principals really birthed that. So I would say, starting with your administration, get their buy-in, and then the teachers will just kind of flow.
Mike, did you have anything that you wanted to say on that one, or should we move on to something else?
Again, I think Joey stated really well, and he did it in his presentation, to focus on that pedagogy. And then find ways to use that same pedagogy as you're instructing teachers. There's no better way. Let's take like an LMS. Let's not tell teachers what an LMS is and show them little pieces of it one-to-one. Let's put them in the LMS. And to me, it's just, what pedagogy are you using, and use the technology then to really help you with that pedagogy.
Okay.
And with that being said, it's learning with their actual format of the way they've done their training within the platform. That aids to exactly what Michael just said.
Okay, great. Well, and we do have some more questions that have just come in from the audience, but I'm afraid we are running out of time. In fact, we have only about a minute left. So I'm going to wrap up at this point. And if you did ask a question that we did not get a chance to address in the last 15 minutes or so, someone will follow up with you directly and get you some answers to whatever you need to find out. So as we wrap up, though, I want to thank Michael and Joey and George for a really terrific discussion today. And I also would like to thank, on behalf of eSchool Media, I'd like to thank It's Learning for its support. Now, one final reminder before we all sign off, we will be sending out an email to everyone who attended the webinar today when the recording is ready. So that's it. Thank you all for attending, and this concludes today's webcast. Goodbye.